Criminal psychology is a fascinating and often disturbing field of study. It is the science of understanding the minds, intentions, and reactions of those who break the law. We look into this dark world not for entertainment, but for answers. Why do some people cross a line that most of us would never even approach? This question is at the very heart of our work. We want to understand the complex mix of thoughts and feelings that can lead a person to commit the most serious of crimes. By studying these individuals, we hope to find patterns that can help us protect society in the future. It is a difficult journey into human nature, but a necessary one. The study of killers is particularly important because it deals with the ultimate act of harm. When someone takes a life, they create a wound that can never fully heal. For the victims, their families, and the community, the impact is devastating. Criminologists and psychologists spend their careers trying to piece together the puzzle of a killer's mind. They examine every detail of the person's life, from their earliest memories to the moment they committed the crime. This is not about making excuses for their actions. Instead, it is about understanding the causes so we can identify warning signs and intervene before it is too late. The goal is always prevention. To truly understand why a person might kill, we must look beyond the crime itself. We have to explore their entire history. Was there something in their childhood that shaped their view of the world? Did they suffer from a mental illness that was never treated? Were they influenced by the people around them or the environment they grew up in? These are the questions that researchers ask. They conduct interviews, study case files, and analyze evidence to build a complete picture of the individual. This detailed work helps us see the person behind the label of killer, revealing the human complexities that led to their terrible choices. This exploration into the minds of killers is not just an academic exercise. It has real-world applications that can make our communities safer. When we understand the motivations behind different types of crime, law enforcement can develop better strategies for catching offenders. For example, knowing the typical patterns of a certain type of killer can help police narrow down their search for a suspect. Furthermore, this knowledge can inform social policies aimed at preventing crime. By addressing issues like childhood abuse, poverty, and lack of access to mental health care, we can reduce the factors that often contribute to violent behavior. The path is long, but understanding is the first step. There is no single reason why a person commits murder. The motivations are as varied and complex as human beings themselves. Some killings are driven by intense, overwhelming emotions that erupt in a moment of crisis. Feelings like extreme anger, consuming jealousy, or a deep sense of revenge can push someone to act in ways they never thought possible. These are often crimes of passion, where logic and reason are completely overpowered by a storm of emotion. The person might feel they have been wronged in a profound way, and in their distorted state of mind, violence seems like the only possible response to their pain or fury. In other cases, murder is not an emotional outburst, but a cold and calculated decision. Some individuals kill for personal gain, such as financial profit or to eliminate a rival. This type of killing is often planned meticulously, with the goal of achieving a specific outcome without getting caught. The motive here is not passion, but pragmatism. The killer sees another person as an obstacle to their desires, whether that is wealth, power, or freedom. They remove that obstacle in the most permanent way possible. This instrumental violence shows a chilling lack of regard for human life, treating another person as a mere object in the way of a goal. Mental illness can also play a significant role in some cases of homicide. A person suffering from a severe psychotic disorder, like schizophrenia, may experience delusions or hallucinations that compel them to act violently. They might believe they are in danger or that they are being commanded by an external force to harm someone. In these tragic situations, the individual has lost touch with reality, and their actions are a direct result of their illness. It is crucial to remember that the vast majority of people with mental illness are not violent. However, when violence does occur, it is often because their condition has been left untreated or poorly managed. Finally, we must consider the influence of a person's upbringing and social environment. A childhood filled with abuse, neglect, or exposure to constant violence can warp a person's development. It can teach them that violence is a normal way to solve problems, or that other people cannot be trusted. These early experiences can create deep-seated anger and a lack of empathy that persists into adulthood. When combined with other risk factors, such as poverty, social isolation, or involvement with criminal peers, the likelihood of turning to violence increases. The path to murder is often a long one, paved with years of pain and dysfunction. The term psychopath is often used in popular culture, but what does it really mean in psychology? A psychopath is a person who has a severe personality disorder, characterized by a profound lack of empathy. They are simply unable to feel or understand the emotions of other people. This emotional void allows them to hurt others without feeling any guilt, remorse, or sadness. To a psychopath, other people are not seen as individuals with their own feelings and rights. Instead, they are viewed as objects to be used for their own benefit or amusement. This is what makes them so dangerous and difficult to comprehend. Psychopaths are often very charming and manipulative on the surface. They can be skilled actors, able to mimic emotions they do not actually feel. They might appear friendly, confident, and engaging, which allows them to gain the trust of those around them. This is a mask they wear to hide their true nature. Behind this mask is a person who is often arrogant, impulsive, and has a grandiose sense of their own importance. They do not learn from their mistakes or from punishment, as they do not feel the negative consequences in the same way that others do. Their primary focus is always on their own needs and desires. It is important to understand that not all psychopaths are killers. In fact, many are not physically violent at all. They may use their manipulative skills to succeed in business, politics, or other areas of life where a ruthless and unemotional approach can be an advantage. These are sometimes called successful psychopaths. However, when a psychopath does turn to violence, they can be particularly frightening. Their crimes are often cold, calculated, and predatory. Because they do not feel fear or empathy, their violence can be extreme and without any clear emotional motive, making it all the more chilling for investigators and the public. Psychologists believe that psychopathy has deep roots in a person's biology and brain structure. Studies have shown that the brains of psychopaths may be different from those of other people, particularly in the areas that control emotions and decision-making. For example, the amygdala, a part of the brain that processes fear and other emotions, often shows less activity in psychopaths. This suggests that their condition is not simply a choice, but is linked to their fundamental brain wiring. This biological basis helps explain why psychopathy is so difficult to treat, and why these individuals rarely change their behavior over time. They are, in a sense, emotionally colorblind. While often used interchangeably with psychopath, the term sociopath describes a slightly different pattern of behavior. Both psychopaths and sociopaths disregard the rights and feelings of others, but the origins of their conditions are thought to be different. While psychopathy is largely believed to be genetic or biological, sociopathy is seen as the result of a person's environment. A sociopath is often a product of a troubled childhood, perhaps one filled with severe abuse, neglect, or instability. Their antisocial behavior is a learned response to a world that has shown them no kindness or consistency. They were not born without a conscience. It was eroded over time. Because their condition is learned, sociopaths may show different behaviors than psychopaths. They tend to be more erratic, impulsive, and prone to emotional outbursts. While a psychopath can be cool and calculating, a sociopath is more likely to be hot-headed and act without thinking. This makes them less able to hold down a steady job or maintain long-term relationships. Their lives are often chaotic and unstable. Unlike psychopaths, some sociopaths may be capable of forming attachments to a small number of people, like a close friend or a family member. However, their relationships with the rest of society remain dysfunctional and hostile. The crimes committed by sociopaths often reflect their impulsive nature. Their actions might be disorganized and spontaneous rather than carefully planned. A sociopath might lash out violently in a fit of rage, leaving a messy and obvious trail of evidence for police to follow. They struggle to maintain the kind of mask that a psychopath wears so effortlessly. Their agitation and hostility are often visible to those around them. This makes them more likely to be identified as troubled individuals, although their behavior is often dismissed as delinquency or anger issues, rather than a deeper personality disorder, until it is too late. Understanding the distinction between these terms helps us think about prevention and treatment. Since sociopathy is linked to environmental factors, there is a greater hope for intervention. If a child is growing up in a damaging environment, providing support and stability could potentially prevent them from developing antisocial traits. For adults who are already sociopaths, therapy might have some success if it can address the underlying trauma, and teach them new ways of coping with their emotions and interacting with others. The key is to address the root causes in their environment, offering a different path before their destructive behaviors become permanently ingrained. Alright, so, let's dive into Section 5. The troubled mind, mental illness, and murder. When a terrible and seemingly senseless murder occurs, people often assume, oh, the killer must be insane. However, the link between mental illness and violence is far more complex than that. It's true that in a small number of cases, a severe mental disorder can be a direct cause of a homicide. For instance, an individual suffering from paranoid schizophrenia might experience powerful delusions, believing that someone is trying to harm them. In their mind, acting violently is a form of self-defense. They're not acting out of malice, but out of a distorted perception of reality, unable to distinguish between their internal fears and the external world. Another example can be found in severe cases of depression with psychotic features. A person might fall into such a deep state of despair that they decide to end their own life and the lives of their family members. They may wrongly believe they are sparing their loved ones from a world of suffering. These are tragic acts born not from hate, but from a profound and all-consuming illness. It's vital to understand that these situations are extremely rare. The vast majority of people who suffer from depression, schizophrenia, or other serious mental illnesses are not violent. In fact, they are far more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators. Now, the legal concept of insanity is also important to understand. It's not the same as a medical diagnosis. In a court of law, being found not guilty by reason of insanity means that, at the time of the crime, the person was so mentally unwell that they did not understand that their actions were wrong. This is a very high legal standard to meet. It requires extensive psychological evaluation to prove that the person's illness completely removed their ability to make a rational moral judgment. This defense is used very infrequently and is successful even less often, despite what is often portrayed in films and television shows. The real issue is often not the mental illness itself, but the lack of treatment for it. Many individuals who commit violent acts have a history of mental health problems that were ignored, undiagnosed, or improperly treated. They may have tried to seek help, but were unable to get it due to cost, stigma, or a lack of available services. When a person's suffering is left to fester without support, their condition can worsen until they reach a crisis point. Therefore, a key part of crime prevention is ensuring that everyone has access to quality mental health care. Treating the illness is the most effective way to prevent these rare but tragic acts of violence. The experiences of childhood lay the foundation for the person we become in adulthood. For some, this foundation is built with love, stability, and support. For others, it is built on a ground of fear, violence, and neglect. A childhood marked by significant trauma can have a devastating impact on a person's development, sometimes setting them on a path toward future violence. When a child is consistently exposed to abuse, whether it is physical, emotional, or sexual, they learn harmful lessons about the world. They may learn that violence is an acceptable way to exert power, or that people who are supposed to care for you will ultimately hurt you. This early exposure to trauma can fundamentally alter a child's brain development. The constant state of fear and stress can disrupt the formation of healthy emotional regulation and impulse control. A child who grows up in a chaotic and violent home may develop a hair-trigger response to perceived threats, reacting with aggression because their brain has been wired for survival above all else. They may also struggle to develop empathy, as they have never been shown consistent compassion themselves. This lack of empathy makes it easier for them to inflict pain on others later in life, as they cannot fully grasp the suffering they are causing. Neglect can be just as damaging as active abuse. A child who is ignored and whose basic needs for affection, attention, and care are not met can develop what is known as an attachment disorder. They fail to form the healthy emotional bonds with caregivers that are essential for social and emotional development. This can lead to a deep-seated distrust of others and an inability to form meaningful relationships in adulthood. For some, this isolation and emotional emptiness can manifest as anger and resentment toward a world that seems to have abandoned them, creating a fertile ground for violent fantasies and actions. Of course, it must be said that most people who endure terrible childhoods do not become killers. The human spirit is incredibly resilient, and many survivors of trauma go on to lead healthy, productive lives. However, for a minority, the damage is too deep. When childhood trauma is combined with other risk factors, such as a genetic predisposition to aggression, substance abuse, or social isolation, the risk of violent behavior increases dramatically. Understanding the profound and lasting impact of childhood is therefore essential. Protecting children from harm is not just a moral duty. It is one of the most effective long-term crime prevention strategies we have. No person is an island. We are all shaped by the society in which we live. The social and cultural environment can play a powerful role in either encouraging or discouraging violent behavior. A society that glorifies violence in its media, games, and stories may inadvertently normalize aggression. When fictional heroes and real-life figures are constantly shown solving problems through force, it can send a message that violence is an effective and acceptable tool for achieving one's goals. While exposure to violent media alone does not create a killer, for an already vulnerable individual, it can reinforce aggressive thoughts and fantasies, making them seem more permissible. Economic factors also have a significant impact on crime rates. Communities with high levels of poverty, unemployment, and inequality often experience more violence. When people feel they have no legitimate opportunities to succeed, some may turn to illegal activities out of desperation or a sense of injustice. The chronic stress of financial hardship can also contribute to aggression and family breakdown, further increasing the risk of violence. A lack of resources, such as good schools, safe housing, and community centers, leaves young people with few positive outlets and makes them more susceptible to the influence of gangs and criminal subcultures. Social isolation is another powerful contributor to violent potential. Humans are social creatures who need a sense of belonging. When an individual becomes disconnected from their community, whether due to mental illness, social awkwardness, or other factors, they can develop feelings of alienation and resentment. They may feel invisible or rejected by society, and this can curdle into a dangerous anger. In some cases, a person who feels completely isolated may seek to force the world to notice them through a shocking act of violence. They desire infamy because they have been denied any form of positive recognition. This is a common theme in the histories of many mass shooters. By understanding these social factors, we can see that crime is not just an individual problem, but also a community problem. To prevent violence, we must work to strengthen the social fabric. This means investing in education, creating economic opportunities, and fighting poverty. It means building strong, supportive communities where people feel connected and valued. It also involves challenging cultural norms that glorify violence and promoting messages of empathy and peaceful conflict resolution. By addressing the societal conditions that allow violence to flourish, we can create a safer and healthier world for everyone, tackling the problem at its source rather than just reacting to its symptoms. To understand the minds of killers, psychologists and criminologists use a range of detailed and systematic methods. One of the most important tools is the clinical interview. Researchers may spend many hours speaking directly with convicted murderers in prison. These interviews are carefully structured to explore the person's entire life story, from their earliest memories to their thoughts and feelings during the crime. The goal is to build a comprehensive psychological history, identifying key events, relationships, and patterns of thinking that may have contributed to their actions. It takes great skill to build enough rapport for the person to speak openly, but these conversations provide invaluable first-hand insight. Another key method is the analysis of case files. Investigators gather every piece of information available about the killer and their crimes. This includes police reports, witness statements, forensic evidence, and court transcripts. They also look at school records, medical histories, employment records, and any other documents that can shed light on the person's life. By piecing together all this information, researchers can create a detailed timeline and identify potential triggers or stressors that preceded the violence. This archival research is like assembling a massive, complex puzzle, where each small piece of data adds to the overall picture of the individual. Psychological testing is also a crucial part of the evaluation. There are standardized tests designed to assess personality traits, intelligence, and the presence of mental disorders. For example, the Psychopathy Checklist Revised, PCLR, is a tool used by trained clinicians to measure the extent of a person's psychopathic traits. These tests provide objective data that can be compared across different individuals, helping researchers to identify common psychological profiles among certain types of offenders. This scientific approach adds rigor to the study of criminal minds, moving beyond simple observation to quantifiable measurement and analysis of their mental state. Finally, investigators use a technique called criminal profiling, especially when a serial offender is at large. Profiling involves analyzing the crime scene and the nature of the crime to make educated guesses about the characteristics of the perpetrator. For instance, the level of organization at a crime scene can suggest whether the killer is intelligent and methodical or chaotic and impulsive. This helps police focus their investigation on a smaller pool of potential suspects. While not an exact science, profiling is a useful investigative tool that is built upon decades of research into the behavior and psychology of known offenders. It is a practical application of our understanding of the criminal mind. The study of the criminal mind is not merely an academic pursuit. Its ultimate purpose is to build a safer society for everyone. Every insight we gain into the causes of violence is a potential tool for prevention. When we understand the destructive role that childhood trauma can play, it highlights the urgent need for robust child protection services. By intervening early to support families in crisis and protect children from abuse and neglect, we can break the cycle of violence before it begins. This is perhaps the most powerful form of crime prevention, as it addresses the problem at its very roots, nurturing healthier individuals from the start. Knowledge about mental illness and its link to rare acts of violence underscores the importance of accessible mental health care. Stigma often prevents people from seeking help, and a lack of resources can mean that even those who do seek it cannot get the support they need. By improving access to diagnosis and treatment, and by educating the public to reduce the stigma surrounding mental health, we can help vulnerable individuals before they reach a crisis point. Providing consistent and compassionate care for those with severe mental disorders is not only a moral imperative, but also a practical strategy for reducing the risk of tragic outcomes. Understanding the social and economic factors that contribute to crime can guide public policy. Investing in disadvantaged communities, improving educational opportunities, and creating meaningful employment can reduce the desperation and hopelessness that often fuel criminal behavior. Building strong communities where people feel connected and supported creates a powerful buffer against social isolation and alienation. When people have a stake in their community and feel a sense of belonging, they are far less likely to turn against it. Crime prevention, in this sense, is about building a more just and equitable society for all its members. In the end, Unraveling the Minds of Killers teaches us a profound lesson about our shared humanity. It shows us that violence is rarely born from a single cause, but from a complex web of biological, psychological, and social factors. While we must hold individuals accountable for their actions, we must also recognize our collective responsibility to address the conditions that allow violence to grow. By using the knowledge gained from this difficult field of study, we can move from simply reacting to crime to proactively preventing it. This journey into darkness can, if we are wise, ultimately lead us toward a brighter and more peaceful future.